You know El Chapo, the world's most infamous drug lord, who's now locked away in a supermax prison for life. But what if I told you his son might be even more dangerous? And he's been evading capture for years, despite being one of the DEA's most wanted targets. Meet Iván Archivaldo Guzmán Salazar, alias Chapito, El Chapo's eldest son, heir to a billion-dollar empire, and the man U.S. authorities have been hunting for over half a decade. Today we dive into his early life, his rise through the Sinaloa cartel, why he's worth more to the feds than almost anyone alive, and most importantly, where he might be hiding right now. Make sure you watch until the end, because we're going to reveal the exact strategies keeping him one step ahead of the world's most powerful law enforcement agencies. This is the story of Iván Archivaldo Guzmán Salazar, the ghost of the Sierra Madre, and it's one you won't forget. Iván Archivaldo was born in 1983 in Jesus Maria, a small municipality in the heart of Sinaloa, Mexico. This wasn't just any corner of Mexico. This was ground zero for the drug trade, where poppy fields stretch across mountain valleys and cartel culture runs deeper than government authority. He was born into narco royalty, plain and simple. His father, Joaquín Guzmán Loera, known as El Chapo, was already climbing the ranks of what would become the most powerful criminal organization in the Western Hemisphere. His mother, Maria Alejandrina Salazar Hernandez, came from a well-known family in the region, connected to the same networks that had trafficked drugs for generations. That made Iván Archivaldo cartel royalty from day one. From a young age, Iván wasn't playing soccer in the streets or dreaming of normal careers. He was watching convoys of armed men roll through his neighborhood. He was seeing stacks of cash that most people never encounter in a lifetime. While other kids were learning math in classrooms, Iván was learning the logistics of a multi-billion-dollar criminal enterprise at his father's knee. He grew up surrounded by luxury SUVs, private parties, and whispers of power that could topple governments. But in that world, privilege came with a target on your back. And for Iván, that target would only grow larger as he got older. When Iván was just 22 years old, everything clicked into place for him, but not in the way most young men find their calling. February 22nd, 2005. Mexican military forces, working with U.S. intelligence, launched a coordinated operation. The target wasn't just any cartel operative. It was his father, El Chapo. In a dramatic raid, they captured the man who had become a legend, a ghost who'd escaped prison before and who commanded an empire worth billions. Iván watched his father get dragged away in handcuffs, broadcast across every television in Mexico. Could have broken him. Could have sent him running to legitimacy, to a quiet life funded by his father's hidden fortune. Instead, it ignited something else entirely. At El Chapo's first high-profile court appearance, Iván was there in the gallery. Witnesses reported he sat stone-faced, taking in every word, every gesture from prosecutors. In Sinaloa's narco culture, that was more than family loyalty. It was a declaration. It was a young prince watching his king and learning that the throne doesn't stay empty for long. Iván took it to heart. Within months, he'd gone from being El Chapo's privileged son to being an active operator in the Sinaloa cartel, starting to build his own network of loyalty, his own reputation, his own empire. After his father's capture, Iván went all in on the family business. By his mid-20s, he was already a plaza boss, controlling key trafficking routes and commanding hundreds of armed men. But here's what made Iván different from his father. El Chapo was old school, careful, a master of staying in the shadows. Iván and his younger brother Alfredo, known together as Los Chapitos, operated with a different mentality. They were flashy, they were bold, and they were absolutely ruthless when it came to protecting their territory. Iván built his reputation on two things: loyalty and violence. He surrounded himself with childhood friends from Sinaloa, creating a faction within the cartel that answered to him first. Locals started whispering about Chapito, the young boss who threw parties that made headlines and ordered hits that made people disappear. In the late 2000s and early 2010s, Iván's lifestyle was impossible to hide. He posted photos on social media showing fleets of luxury vehicles, designer clothes, and exotic animals kept as pets. In one infamous photo, he's posing with a tiger. In another, he's at a private party with a table full of champagne bottles that cost more than most Mexicans earn in a year. His followers ate it up. Corridos, the folk songs that celebrate cartel figures, started name-dropping Iván Archivaldo alongside his legendary father. He was becoming famous, becoming a brand. But fame has a price, and for Chapito, it came fast and brutally. It's August 15th, 2016, just after 1 a.m. Even though violence had been escalating in Sinaloa, even though rival cartels were making moves, Iván Archivaldo decided to go out. He and about a dozen associates, including his brother Jesus Alfredo, were at La Leche, an upscale restaurant in Puerto Vallarta. This wasn't cartel territory. This was a tourist zone, supposedly neutral ground. They're eating, drinking, celebrating. Around them, regular customers are doing the same, completely unaware of who's at the table in the corner. What Iván doesn't know is that a Jalisco New Generation cartel hit team had tracked him there. CJNG, led by the ruthless Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, alias El Mencho, had declared war on the Sinaloa cartel, and they'd just found the ultimate prize. 1:30 a.m., as Iván's group is finishing their meal, the front doors burst open. What sounded like cars backfiring was actually the sound of automatic weapons being charged. Armed men flood into the restaurant. Screaming erupts. Customers dive under tables. Within seconds, Iván and at least 6 of his associates are surrounded. No shots fired. This isn't a hit. It's a kidnapping. They're forced into waiting vehicles at gunpoint. The entire operation takes less than 3 minutes. In less than 5 minutes, they're gone. Vanished into the night. When the dust clears, witnesses are in shock. The restaurant is trashed, but there's no blood. Local police arrive to find abandoned plates of food, overturned chairs, and terrified tourists. Word spreads through the underworld immediately. Los Chapitos have been taken. The Sinaloa cartel went into emergency mode. Within hours, roadblocks appeared across multiple states. Cartel gunmen were mobilized. Messages were sent through every channel. The price on the kidnappers' heads was astronomical. News of the kidnapping spread like wildfire through Mexico's criminal underworld. This wasn't just any abduction. This was a direct attack on the Guzman bloodline, an act of war that demanded an immediate response. Iván's captivity lasted less than a week, but what happened during those days remains shrouded in mystery and competing narratives. The official story that circulated was that high-level negotiations took place. The Mexican government, wanting to avoid all-out cartel warfare that would devastate entire regions, allegedly applied pressure on CJNG through intermediaries. The Sinaloa cartel, meanwhile, mobilized every resource they had. Hundreds of armed men began hunting for any trace of where Los Chapitos were being held. But other whispers never went away. One of the most talked about theories came from cartel insiders who later testified in U.S. courts. According to them, El Chapo, even from behind bars, orchestrated a deal. The rumor was that massive payments were made. Mas en bene, multiple shipments of drugs were handed over to CJNG as ransom, and promises of territorial concessions were put on the table. There was also talk that the Mexican military actually located where Iván was being held, and that a covert operation was launched. In this version, the rescue wasn't negotiated. It was executed with force, but covered up to avoid international scrutiny. And then came the most dramatic rumor of all. This version says that El Mencho himself called off the kidnapping after realizing that killing or keeping El Chapo's sons would trigger a war that would destroy the drug trade itself. that the economic consequences of total war between the cartels would hurt everyone's bottom line so catastrophically that even rivals had to step back. Each of these stories paints a very different picture of power, negotiation, and violence. Was it money? Was it military force? Or was it cold calculation about profit margins that brought Iván home? No investigation ever produced a clear answer. What is certain is that when Iván Archivaldo was released on August 20th, 2016, the cartel landscape had fundamentally shifted. Los Chapitos emerged more paranoid, more violent, and more determined than ever to never appear weak again. The kidnapping was a wake-up call, but not the kind that makes you retire. For Iván, it was fuel. By 2017, he and his brothers weren't just running operations, they were effectively leading an entire faction of the Sinaloa cartel while their father sat in a Mexican prison fighting extradition. Then came February 2017. The U.S. Department of Justice unsealed indictments against Iván Archivaldo and his brother Jesus Alfredo. The charges were staggering: conspiracy to distribute cocaine, methamphetamine, and marijuana into the United States. The indictment alleged they were trafficking literally tons of drugs across the border monthly. But here's one of the wildest facts about what made Iván so valuable to U.S. prosecutors. He wasn't just trafficking drugs. According to DEA intelligence, Iván and Los Chapitos had pioneered the Sinaloa cartel's move into fentanyl production. This deadly synthetic opioid, which can be manufactured in labs without needing poppy fields, was flooding into the United States and killing tens of thousands of Americans annually. The U.S. government wasn't just interested in arresting Iván. They wanted to dismantle the entire fentanyl supply chain. And he was at the center of it. The State Department put a $5 million reward on his head. Later, that reward would climb even higher. For context, that's the kind of bounty usually reserved for international terrorists. The money Iván was making was almost incomprehensible. Conservative estimates from financial investigators suggested that Los Chapitos' faction was generating between $2 and $3 billion annually in drug proceeds. Iván himself was believed to control assets worth hundreds of millions, luxury properties across Mexico, fleets of armored vehicles, legitimate businesses used for money laundering. His personal wealth made him one of the richest criminals in the world. But that wealth came with constant pressure. By 2019, the walls were closing in, not just on Iván, but on everyone around him. His father, El Chapo, was extradited to the United States in January 2017. By 2019, he was on trial in New York, and the testimony was devastating. Former cartel associates, some of them people who'd worked directly with Los Chapitos, were flipping, taking deals, testifying about the organization's inner workings. Then came October 17, 2019. Mexican security forces, acting on U.S. intelligence, launched an operation in Culiacan, Sinaloa. The target was Iván's younger brother, Ovidio Guzmán López, another key member of Los Chapitos. They found him. They arrested him. And then all hell broke loose. Within hours, hundreds of cartel gunmen mobilized in Culiacan. They didn't just fight the military, they laid siege to the entire city. Burning vehicles blocked roads. Gunmen fired .50 caliber machine guns at military convoys. They attacked the families of soldiers. The Mexican government, facing a potential massacre and complete loss of control, made a stunning decision. They released Ovidio. The message was clear. Los Chapitos had so much power, so much firepower, and so much reach that they could force a government to back down. But it also put an even bigger target on all their backs. Now the U.S. government wasn't just interested in arrests. They wanted to make examples. One by one, people in Iván's inner circle started falling. Associates were arrested at the border. Financial facilitators were picked up in money laundering stings. In January 2023, his brother Ovidio was finally recaptured in another massive military operation and quickly extradited to the United States. Everybody around Iván was getting picked up by U.S. feds or Mexican forces working with U.S. intelligence. The net was tightening, and Iván Archivaldo, the heir to El Chapo's throne, had to make a choice: surrender and face life in prison like his father, or disappear completely. He chose to disappear. So where is Iván Archivaldo right now? That's the billion-dollar question that keeps DEA agents up at night and drives military operations across Mexico. The answer isn't simple, because Iván isn't hiding in one place. His survival depends on constant movement, strategic positioning, and a network of protection that's been built over decades. Let's start with the most likely location: the rural mountains of Sinaloa, especially the Sierra Madre Occidental. This is the top consensus among intelligence analysts, and for good reason. These mountains are the ancestral heartland of the Guzman family. El Chapo hid here for years after his first prison escape. The terrain is absolutely brutal for anyone trying to conduct military or law enforcement operations. We're talking about peaks that reach over 10,000 feet, valleys accessible only by dirt roads that can be washed out by rain, and forests so dense that aerial surveillance is nearly useless. But it's not just the terrain that protects Iván, it's the infrastructure. The Sinaloa cartel has spent literally decades building a network of safe houses, supply routes, and communication systems in these mountains. There are ranches that look like ordinary farms, but are actually fortified compounds. There are villages where every single resident is either on the cartel payroll or related to someone who is. The Guzman family has cultivated loyalty here through a combination of money, intimidation, and genuine local support built on providing services the government never has. When military helicopters fly over these regions, they're spotted immediately. When convoys try to drive up mountain roads, lookouts report their movements hours in advance. The cartel has radio networks, scouts positioned on every major route, and even alleged informants within local and state police forces. By the time authorities arrive at a suspected safe house, Iván is long gone. But here's the crucial part: Iván Archivaldo is not stationary. The second most important element of his survival strategy is constant movement between safe zones. Think about it this way: if Iván stayed in one fortified compound, no matter how remote, eventually the intelligence would solidify. Eventually, satellite imagery, signals intelligence, or human sources would pinpoint his exact location. Then the Mexican military, or even U.S. Special Operations advisors, could plan a raid he couldn't escape. Instead, Iván moves frequently. Intelligence reports suggest he rarely stays in the same location for more than a few days, maybe a week at most. He uses rotating safe houses across multiple municipalities. One week, he might be in the highlands east of Culiacan. 2 weeks later, he's in a different mountain range entirely. He travels in small convoys, changes vehicles regularly, and almost certainly uses decoy vehicles to throw off surveillance. Crucially, Iván limits electronic communication to an extreme degree. He knows that phones are tracking devices. Every call, every text, every moment a phone is powered on creates a digital signature that can be intercepted. So he operates like his father did during his fugitive years, using intermediaries, relying on face-to-face meetings, and employing low-tech communication methods that are much harder to intercept. He avoids predictable patterns. He doesn't visit the same locations on the same days. He doesn't attend family gatherings at known addresses. He doesn't do any of the things that allow intelligence agencies to predict where he'll be and set up operations accordingly. This constant movement is why large-scale military operations repeatedly fail to capture him. By the time the intelligence is gathered, the plan is made, and the forces are deployed, Iván has already moved to a different location entirely. It's like trying to catch smoke. The third element of his hiding strategy involves protected zones controlled by loyal factions, particularly areas dominated by Los Chapitos. Understand that Iván doesn't just hide in empty wilderness, he hides in regions where the Sinaloa cartel, and specifically his faction, has complete territorial control. These are areas where local intelligence networks are constantly monitoring military movements, controlling roads and checkpoints, and providing real-time information about any threats. In these zones, cartel gunmen don't just provide security through force. They provide security through information. They know who's coming in and out of the region. They track unfamiliar vehicles. They monitor hotels for anyone who might be law enforcement. They have people inside local businesses, taxi services, even government offices who report anything suspicious. When an outsider enters these territories, Los Chapitos know about it almost immediately. When military convoys are mobilizing 2 states away, scouts report it. This information network gives Iván something invaluable: time. Time to pack up, time to move, time to disappear before anyone gets close. The protection comes from knowing what's happening before it happens, not just from having gunmen with rifles. Though make no mistake, if authorities did locate him, Iván would have access to heavily armed security forces within minutes. The October 2019 Battle of Culiacan proved that Los Chapitos can mobilize hundreds of fighters almost instantly. Now, there's a fourth possibility that intelligence agencies monitor, but that's much harder to confirm: rare cross-border movement. Some reports suggest Iván occasionally moves toward northern Mexico, specifically corridors in Sonora or Chihuahua. These border regions offer different strategic advantages. They're closer to smuggling routes, they're areas where the cartel has different kinds of infrastructure, and they provide options for potentially moving money or communicating with US-based operatives more easily. However, there is no confirmed evidence that Iván is hiding in the United States itself. Despite his wealth and connections, crossing into US territory would be extraordinarily high risk. US law enforcement has sophisticated surveillance systems, extensive databases, and none of the corruption or intimidation factors that protect him in Mexico. If he entered the United States, he'd be operating in genuinely hostile territory where his every advantage disappears. So if he does move toward the border, it's likely brief, strategic, and immediately followed by a return to his safe zones in Sinaloa. The risk-reward calculation just doesn't favor extended stays anywhere near US jurisdiction. Let's break down the specific tactics and strategies that have kept Iván Archivaldo free when so many others have been captured or killed. First, technology discipline. Iván operates with the assumption that any electronic device can be tracked, hacked, or intercepted. According to intelligence sources, he rarely uses smartphones. When he does communicate electronically, he reportedly uses encrypted devices that are replaced frequently, sometimes even destroyed after a single use. Messages are short, coded, and sent through intermediaries. He never discusses operational details over any electronic medium. This is a lesson learned directly from his father's experience. El Chapo was partially tracked through electronic communications before his recapture. Iván isn't making the same mistake. He's essentially living like it's the 1980s in terms of communication security, and that makes him incredibly difficult to locate using modern surveillance technology. Second, compartmentalization. Iván doesn't operate through a traditional hierarchy where he directly commands all operations. Instead, Los Chapitos use a cell structure where different groups handle different aspects of the business: drug production, transportation, money laundering, security, and most cells don't know what the others are doing or where Iván is at any given time. This means that when authorities arrest cartel members, even relatively high-ranking ones, those people genuinely can't give up Iván's location because they don't know it. They might know how to send messages up the chain, but they don't have direct access or current intelligence about where he's physically located. Third, local support and legitimacy. Here's something that doesn't get discussed enough. In parts of Sinaloa, Los Chapitos aren't just feared. They're genuinely supported by portions of the local population. The Sinaloa cartel, and the Guzman family specifically, has spent decades investing in local communities. They've funded schools, provided medical care, built roads, and offered employment in regions where the government has historically provided almost nothing. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Los Chapitos reportedly distributed food packages with their name on them. This isn't charity, it's strategy. It builds a base of community support that makes it much harder for authorities to operate. When everyone in a village sees the military as hostile outsiders and Los Chapitos as local benefactors, intelligence gathering becomes nearly impossible. Nobody talks to the authorities. Nobody cooperates with investigations. And people actively help hide cartel members. Fourth, financial resources. With hundreds of millions of dollars at his disposal, Iván can afford the best security money can buy. We're talking about military-grade weapons, armored vehicles, communication equipment, and most importantly, information. Money buys loyalty. Money buys silence. Money buys tips from corrupt officials about upcoming operations. Money pays for scouts, safe houses, logistics, and the entire support network that makes staying hidden possible. As long as the drug money keeps flowing, and it absolutely is, Iván has virtually unlimited resources to fund his evasion. Fifth, strategic patience. Unlike some cartel leaders who can't resist returning to certain places for family events, mistresses, or comfort, Iván has shown remarkable discipline in avoiding sentimental mistakes. If that means not attending his child's birthday party at a known location, he doesn't go. If that means not visiting a sick relative in a hospital, he doesn't go. He's calculated that his freedom depends on never being predictable, never being sentimental, and never taking unnecessary risks. That kind of discipline is rare, and it's one of the main reasons he's still free. But here's the reality that Iván Archivaldo faces every single day. He can't hide forever. The pressure isn't decreasing, it's intensifying. The United States government has made Los Chapitos a top priority. After El Chapo's conviction, after the fentanyl crisis exploded into a full-blown epidemic, killing over 100,000 Americans annually, U.S. authorities decided that going after the supply chain leadership was a matter of national security. That means more resources, more intelligence cooperation with Mexico, and more sophisticated technology dedicated specifically to finding him. The Mexican government, despite corruption and capacity issues, is also under enormous pressure. Every time Los Chapitos makes headlines, every time they demonstrate they can challenge state authority like they did in Culiacan, it's an embarrassment to the administration. President López Obrador's security strategy has been heavily criticized, and capturing high-profile cartel leaders would be politically valuable. And then there's the internal cartel dynamics. As his brothers get arrested and extradited, as rivals like CJNG continue to push for territory, as younger, more reckless operators challenge the old guard, Iván's position becomes more precarious. The cartel world doesn't reward defensive strategies forever. At some point, hiding looks like weakness. At some point, other ambitious leaders might decide that Los Chapitos are vulnerable. Iván is also aging. He's in his early 40s now. The life of constant movement, sleeping in different places, limited contact with family, constant paranoia, it takes a toll. Unlike legitimate businessmen who can retire comfortably, Iván can never retire. There's no graceful exit from being on the DEA's most wanted list. There's no deal that makes the charges go away. His only options are to keep running, surrender, or die. The slightest mistake could be catastrophic. If he gets comfortable and stays too long in one location, if he trusts the wrong person who becomes an informant, if he uses a phone at the wrong moment, if a family emergency makes him predictable, the years of careful evasion could end in a single night. Intelligence agencies are patient. They're building patterns, analyzing years of data, developing sources, and waiting for that one error. They know that everyone slips eventually. Everyone makes one call they shouldn't. Everyone visits one place they're not supposed to. Everyone has one person they trust who turns out to be a liability. And when they find out where he is at, if they get solid intelligence that Iván Archivaldo is at a specific location at a specific time, the response will be overwhelming. We're talking about coordinated operations involving hundreds of Mexican military personnel, possibly with U.S. Special Operations support and intelligence. They'll surround the location, cut off all escape routes, and use every asset at their disposal. It might be over for him in minutes. One wrong move, one predictable pattern, one trusted associate who flips. That's all it takes. Iván Archivaldo Guzmán Salazar started as a privileged kid born into one of the world's most powerful criminal organizations. He could have walked away, could have lived quietly off his family's wealth, could have chosen any life except this one. Instead, he followed in his father's footsteps, became a leader of Los Chapitos, helped fuel a fentanyl epidemic that's destroyed countless lives, and now spends every day running from forces that have essentially unlimited resources and unlimited time to hunt him. He survived kidnapping. He survived betrayals. He survived his father's capture and his brother's arrests. He survived by being smarter, more disciplined, and more paranoid than almost anyone in the cartel world, but he's not untouchable. He's not invisible. He's a wanted man with a multi-million-dollar bounty on his head, hunted by the world's most sophisticated law enforcement agencies, and relying on a strategy that only works as long as he never makes a single mistake. The mountains of Sinaloa are vast, but they're not infinite. The safe houses are well protected, but they're not impenetrable. The loyal networks are extensive, but they're not incorruptible. And time, ultimately, is not on his side. Subscribe to Inform Secreto to continue exploring the hidden stories behind power. Real stories told unfiltered, because what you don't see also controls the world. See you soon.